Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, I'm Matt with Duke's Models, and this is the Flankoff. Okay, welcome to the next installment of the Flankoff. This time out, we're going to be dealing with the suckiest part of any modern jet, the intakes. Now, the intakes suck for two reasons. First, they suck air in to power the jets, and second, they suck generally on models because they are hollow tubes that are very difficult to render in a way that does not leave either ejector pin marks or seams that need to be dealt with up inside the tube, which is just generally a big pain in the ass. However, before we get into that, I wanted to touch on one quick thing I've done in the lead up, which is to install parts C40 and C41 into their places, into their respective places, before we get any further along. Now, the reason for that is that when you install these gear struts, you're supposed to attach the C40 and 41 parts to the gear struts before you install. But there's all kinds of shit sitting on top of these. There's the intakes, there's these little boxes that go, you can see the sort of guide rails there where those go. And this thing has a pretty long mounting pin. Looks like Kitty Hawk might have learned a bit from the SU-17. And apparently when you're trying to get it in there and all that shit's in the way, there's absolutely no way that these parts will go in place. So Tom Hutchins on his Man vs. Kit blog very helpfully suggested installing those well in advance, so that is what I've done. I figure the posts on these are strong enough that this isn't really going to make or break alignment either way. There are all kinds of other pieces that help locate the gear struts, and these are kind of tucked away, so if the joint isn't exactly perfect, you're not really going to see much of it. Now let's go ahead and look at what Kitty Hawk has given us for the intakes. So basically the intakes start with installing the faces of the turbines here, so the intake fans and all that, and these little boxes that I mentioned that go right here. We've also got these little C parts, C27 and C19, etc., that kind of go in here. Again, they're playing their silly opposite game, which everybody just loves. Hopefully, on another instruction page, they provide an overhead view that just labels the parts. Imagine that. Yeah, it's kind of helpful, isn't it? So anyway, let's look at how the intakes themselves work. We'll get to those things here in a second. With the intakes, you basically have the forward trunk that goes right here. You have the roof of the forward trunk, which also has the hump for the gear bay, so up in this area. You've got the louvers. You can either do louvers that are closed or louvers that are open. And you've got this little doomajiggy that connects on here, these E71 and E70 pieces, and these little C parts that connect on top. And you've got a little PE screen that goes here. I think these are the mesh grills that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on the 35, they drop down when the aircraft is on the ground because of Russia's awesome runways and whatnot. So I believe that is the case, but we will get into that in a moment. So for now, let's take a look at the main plastic parts. I'm just going to do one side and we'll look at how they go together, and then I'll pause because there's got to be some painting and shit like that that has to happen. Okay, so first of all, we have got the intake, the main trunk. All I've done on this is cleaned up the attachment points, which are, there's one right here, right on top of this little clippy piece, which is fantastic. There was another one, let's see, they're right up here on the edge of the intake, as you can see, which is also fantastic. As you can see, there is some, let's slide the airframe out of the way. You can see right in there, there's some nice flash on the forward rim of the intake. There's also some flash here where the louvers install, always fun. There's again the cleanup of the sprue attachment points right there. And there are ejector pin marks a million inside. And they are the recessed kind, so if we want to be able to look down this and not see those, we get to fill them. There's also holes right down here for mounting the intake pylons if we want to use those. So overall, pretty decent piece, but a lot of flash, and flash is just tedious to deal with. Next we have the intake roof, which, as you can see, has this little space for the photo etch to go. It's got the indent for the gear bay, which is nicely detailed on the other side. You can see right there. It does have ejector pin marks, but because it's going to be sitting like this, they will literally be invisible, so I'm okay with those. We have the intake louvers. I have opted to go with the closed ones just because I don't want to deal with masking the inside of these things when I'm painting the overall aircraft. And on the inside, ejector pin marks. So we're going to have to deal with these before we install it because I'm not exactly sure how it's going to sit in here, and accessing it could be a challenge. And then we have part E70, this teardrop looking doomajiggy, which attaches like so. Now, considering that it way extends past the join line here, and the join line has me a bit concerned, I'm going to leave this part until later. We'll use that after we've cleaned up any potential issues. So, real quick, let's see how this guy fits into here. Basically got these tabs that you can see that help align it into place. It sits flush along the top here, so that's not bad. And you can see up through there, that is the intake. Then of course we've got the louver. Now when I was playing with the louver piece earlier, it fits either way, but it seems like it fits better one way. Yeah, this was the way that was kind of floppy. So swap it around this way, it seems to sit better. It's still recessed a bit at the back. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that or if that's just the nature of this whole dropping parts into other parts thing. So let's see how this whole setup sits on the actual kit. So there you go. As you can see, the overall sit is pretty good. It's going to take a little bit, it wants to bounce in a couple of different ways, but with a little bit of force, it sits nicely up front. It sits nicely along the gear bays. There's a little bit of what's going to be a gap at the back here. And I think with, proper brute force holding it in place while we glue it, we can minimize that. It's not going to be too bad. So that is the intakes on the Kitty Hawk kit. Now I'm going to go ahead and start getting these all prepped up for paint and all that, because with intakes I prefer to deal with as much of the shit as I can before it comes time to actually install them, so that way I'm not trying to get in there and paint shit when it's already on the kit. Okay, so while we wait for primer to set on the Kitty Hawk intakes, let's go ahead and look at how Great Wall approaches things. The Great Wall kit is a little bit different. Instead of having the engine humps molded into the lower fuselage, they're just left off, leaving us to play with this. Check that out. That is a full length intake and engine trunk. Hot damn. And then I also believe, yes, we have two little holes, as you can see in here, that we get to drill into there for the intake pylons if we want to mount them. Now that's the same on the Kitty Hawk kit, but they're right in the intake floor, so looking in it, you could potentially see them on the Kitty Hawk kit. Great Wall does things a little bit differently. So before we start digging into this, let's go ahead and look at the instructions and see what they prescribe. So basically, we start out with the intake trunk here. And as you can see, we've got the fan blade is a 2-piece affair that connects into these G13 and G15 parts. Not a big fan of putting intakes in half, but at the same time, it gets it out of the realm of having the intake running in here with all these other things, such as the holes for the pylons. So I feel that's one where it's kind of a pick your poison. Then we've got 2 sets of louvers here. D15 is the open louvers, D14 is the closed louvers. They go into this hole. G6 is the FOD screen that pops up when these things are taxiing and landing and all that to keep rocks from the awesome Russian and Syrian and whatnot runways from being sucked into the engine and blowing them up. And then G10 is the intake roof. So let's go ahead and take a look at how all this comes together. Okay, what have we got? Well, first of all, we've got the 2-piece turbine fan. Looks pretty nice. It's way back in the trunk, so you're not going to see much of it. Then I've gone ahead and taped together the intake trunk. So, not bad. You can definitely see in there some seams, though. Let me grab a light so we can see it a little bit better. And you can see down in there, there's definitely a seam that will need to be taken care of. So, boo on that. The good news is this thing is pretty deep back in the intakes, so I don't think it's going to take much, and you're not going to have to get all the way back in there because, as you can see, this thing kind of collapses in on itself a little bit. So we may be able to get away with just getting filler and sanding in, maybe up to like this first or second brace here. Here is the closed cockpit louvers that I'm going to use. You'll notice this one is handed so that you know which way is forward and which way is back because it's got this extra little ledge. We've got the intake roof, which looks amazing. Let's see if we can get it to focus. There we go. Look at that. That is just lovely. And this is the FOD screen, which I thought they had changed these out to mesh on the newer flankers, but I don't know. For our purposes, this is totally sufficient. So I'm going to start, because the way this works is a lot of these things sort of sandwich down in here on top of each other. And the beauty of it is we don't have to worry about the inside of this at all because the screen sits on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and place the louvers in and glue them in so we can just get that out of the way. So we'll let that do its thing for a minute. And here we've got these. And so, wow, look how visible that is. Once this thing is in place, once the fan's in there and you can't see any of those seams, sanding may not make a whole lot of sense. All right. Okay, so as you can see, this thing has locating pins on it, which line up with the locating pins in the intake. There's actually, as you can see there, a nice guideline for you put the shit right there. So it's really tough to mess up the placement on this. And just like that, that part of the intake is in place, and it is really dark in there and hard to see. And finally, we have the intake roof. Now check this out. See this arrow shape here? How it kind of extends beyond the rectangle both here and up here? Watch this. Yoink, done. Just like that. Everything is in place, the intakes are happy. We don't have any tabs coming down in here that we have to deal with. Everything is nice and clean, except for that damn FOD cover, which is not secured in place. So that's pretty much that for the Great Wall intakes. Now they may look more intimidating on the instructions than the Kitty Hawk kit. However, as you can see, these parts build up very quickly, very cleanly, and make for a very nice looking, come on, FOD screen, make for a very nice looking piece. The only real thing that I would say is a drawback is having to deal with the seam in this intake trunk, but you know, as you can see in here, you can't see in there. So, I mean, even if I'm looking at this and trying to get light down there, it's almost impossible. So that's far enough down the rabbit hole that it's not that big of a deal. Now, to compare that with the Kitty Hawk intakes. So the Kitty Hawk intakes, you know, they look nice as well. They fit pretty well from what I can see. There might be a bit of a danger back here, but you get to fill a whole bunch of ejector pin marks. What is that? 10? No, that's 12 ejector pin marks. And you've got the louvers right here, but the louvers just sit there and there is no FOD screen in place like there is on the Great Wall kit. And granted, when this thing is, you know, built, you're not going to see much of it because getting an angle kind of looking down from the top, there's a whole fucking plane there. So not that big of a deal, but something to consider. There's also this top piece, well, it fits nicely. You know, if you pay close attention, I say it fits nicely, and now I am all butterfingers. But if you pay close attention, look up there by the very top of these intake ramps, and you can see where those tabs are visible. And yeah, you know, we can close it and we can squeeze it and make it all, you know, whatnot, but that's still going to take some serious cement up here to take care of, which risks any sort of advanced painting that you're doing, and there will almost certainly have to be touch-ups to accommodate this. Whereas on the Great Wall kit, this can literally be painted as a separate piece, and just, you can come back in here later and place this like this, and run a little thin thing of glue right there and right in there, and you're done, and that's it. So from an engineering and buildability standpoint, again, as with pretty much all of these installments, there's really no contest. I think that the Great Wall kit is phenomenally done, and it's done in such a way that not only fits together well, but it's very friendly for the build process. You can get in here and paint this and not have to worry about shit. You can drill out holes for the pylons and not have to worry about holes in your intakes, which is not the case here. As you can see, there are holes that will be in the intakes. So overall, I have to give the engineering and approach to this one to Great Wall for sure. Okay, so I've gone ahead and masked and painted the intakes, and here is the Great Wall Hobby rendition of the Su-35's intakes. These were painted with Mr. Paint 297 light blue, which is the underside and kind of overall blue for these things, and Mr. Paint titanium. I went with titanium because, as you can see here, it's still metallic, but it's got a slightly dirtier, warmer tone than, say, straight up aluminum. So, and it didn't go down perfectly, but I don't care too much because the intakes aren't exactly gleaming on these things when you look at them. So it's fairly flat. It's going to be fairly weathered up just a little bit, and I think these do nicely. So that's that. These intakes on the Su-35 or on the Great Wall Su-35, you cannot see down there, but they are phenomenal in terms of fit. There is very little gapping here. It looks, you know, about like it should once it's glued in fully. I have no doubt that it'll be nice and happy. And if you look at the profile here, I think these actually match up pretty closely to what we see on the real thing, so that's great. And yeah, no real complaints here, just have to do a little bit of finishing, and Great Wall includes a few stencils that go on the inside here that I want to get to before I close everything up. Now the Kitty Hawk kit, again, if you look at the lower profile compared to reference photos, it looks like the intakes are maybe a little bit off in their proportions in terms of the upper ramps. You know, the blue bit here looks a bit shorter, so yeah, not quite on point in terms of some of the detail. They also, it's hard to tell just again based on the angles we get, but they also look like they might be a bit deeper, taller perhaps, than what we see. But again, it's really tough to tell with some of the angles that were presented in photography. Now, these are also quite a bit sloppier in terms of how the upper ramps fit in. can see in here there is some noticeable gapping going on where the tabs mount in and all that stuff. Not perfect, but I'm just going to let that lie. Now in terms of how these guys fit, as you can see, overall it's not terrible. There's still going to be a little bit of cleanup that's going to happen back here around where the intakes slot to the engine trunks. But that seems like it's entirely manageable. Okay, so before we lock down the intakes on both kits, we still have to install a couple little bullshit things into the gear base. So let's go ahead and do that with Kitty Hawk first. You can see here we've got these little pieces right here. These C91 and 92 pieces have already been installed back here, and it's worth noting that they are actually on sprue E. Oops. So we've got the C27 bit here, and then if we flip over past the random things in the middle, we've also got C22 and C18 and this mostly helpful-ish guide on where these things go. So let's see about doing that. So first up, we've got this C27 bit. All right, so there's C27. All right. Now we've got C19. It kind of sits on top of it, sort of. So now this is one of those ones where I kind of wish they had zoomed in a bit to show where exactly the fuck this is. Okay, so it does show C19 right there going up against the essentially up against this ledge. It doesn't go onto the ledge, but it goes sort of in front of it. Doesn't give us a whole lot of room to work with, though. So something like that. That'll have to do. Now we've got C22, which goes in this little hole right here, apparently. Okay, so there it is in place. Lock that bad boy down. Now we've got to put C18 up in here somewhere. Someone out there is pissed off. All right. Okay, so I'm supposed to put C18 somewhere in here. But if I look at this side, and I look at this side, there's an extra hole over here. Makes you wonder if maybe that one just didn't make it onto this side. And if I look at the location there, it sure as shit looks like it. So I'm just going to glue it into that area. Okay, so we've got all these little parts added in for the Kitty Hawk gear bays. Now it's time to go ahead and put the intakes on. This is one where I think the best bet is going to be to really focus on this aft join first. And then move up, because up here, everything is pretty good. Back here, it's not quite as happy. You can see the one issue that we're facing here is if you look very carefully at this piece, you can see back here there's a little step right here. It starts right here, and this upper portion is a little bit off. So I'm going to pull out trusty Mr. Razor, and we're going to see if we can't do a little something about that. And this is a good way to cut your fingers open. But if you just do a little scraping motion like this, it's a good way to bring down the surface in a uniform manner, because this thing doesn't, it's flat, obviously. So it's going to help you get to a flat plane, unlike, that's better. May not look better because you got this little bit of primer peeking through here, but it definitely helps. Maybe a little bit more. It's about as good as I'm going to get, I think. So now it's time to lock this fucker down. All right, this will be interesting. So we're gonna get in here, and then we're gonna apply some pressure up here. And joy of this is you just kind of have to hold it for a few moments. All right, there are the intakes. Okay, so now that the Kitty Hawk intakes are on, let's take a look at the stuff that we have to do before we can put the Great Wall Hobby intakes in place. So you can see they go down here at the bottom of step 7. We've got to put the little side bit of the fuselage on that also forms the sort of outer bound of the gear bays, all that. You can see that'll kind of be going in this area. I don't think I'm going to put this little strake on yet. And with C98 in once we get this installed. Otherwise, we've got some wiring with I-31 and I-33 right here. Can't forget that little C51 bit. But first, let's look up here. So we've got this little assemblage of parts from the C tree. This is actually pretty cool. This is essentially the mount for the main gear strut. And it assembles to these couple of things and goes into various holes. And then we've got a couple extra bits right here that drop in right behind it, so it does like that. Now let's see what we've got in here. So as you can see, all these mounting holes are very well defined and very beefy, which is fantastic. And I like the use of squares and the use of alignment holes that kind of only fit one way. So if you look at, this is the main gear mount. It's got that nice sort of D shape for the main gear strip to mount into. But on the other side, it's got this really thick mounting peg and another peg right there. And these just go like that. And so it's, it can wiggle a bit side to side, but hopefully once we put these others on it, it will stay in place, but you can't really rotate it out of bounds because of that other hole. So that's a really nice convenience thing to see. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we've got with these other parts. So we've got this guy here. We've got these parts get increasingly tiny. So this is C46. And the way this one goes on, as I understand it, is kind of like this, which is a little bit loosey-goosey, but it will also plug into these holes. And so I think it's intentionally meant to be just a little bit loose so that we can actually arrange it like so. Now the last bit of this is the only part of this that really worries me, and that is this tiny, tiny little actuator scissor leg type thing. That's why it worries me. Fuck. Okay, so C32 appears to have vanished. So I'm just going to cut my losses because if you think about it, it's a part buried under other parts that will be buried under other parts. So I think we can deal, and it's not really structural. Shut up, compressor. How about you look for the missing part for me? So what we're going to do now is go ahead and lock these bastards in place. I will say I do wish that the fit here were a bit more sure. I mean, it's nice that these have such good things to mount into, but it'd be nice if it was just a little bit less floppy. Still, I think that'll work. So next, we have got C-43 that goes back here, like so. God, I love how these parts fit. And then we've got C-34 and C-19. All right, let's go ahead and place C-19. Love these big beefy mounting locations. And C-34 literally comes in and sits on top of it. Just a little bit of back sanding on the sprue removal area right there. Don't go flying, please. So, voila. Okay, now so I don't forget about it, we're going to go ahead and knock out this C-51 bad boy that goes back here. Here we go with C-51. Look at that. Plug and play. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So I-31 goes onto the intake trunk like so. Now, before I commit fully to gluing this to the side, I want to see if I can kind of get it so I can get in here and work these joins along the exhaust area. So let's see here. I'll zoom out a bit because we don't need to be quite so close anymore. All right, not quite. Boo. It would be nice to be able to do all that in one thing. That's going to be a bit loosey-goosey. Okay, so the challenge here is this has these two pins here and here that go into these things. And it's got some smaller ones up front that help locate it there. But it also plugs pretty deep into the exhaust with these pieces. But these pieces are very floppy. So when we're trying to fit this, it almost forces you to pay way too much attention to the back. See if we can make it happen. Yay. All right. Okay, so there we go. I think we're just gonna have to go from the inside to get the shitlock down there. But let's go ahead and glue in the first intake. Sit here and hold this for a little while. Okay, so I've just wrapped up the Great Wall Hobby intake trunks and want to walk through them quickly so we can move on to the next installment. So again, we've got the nice full-length trunks from the intake to the exhaust. We've got two little holes here and here that we've sort of pre-drilled out so that the intake pylons can go into place later on. You also have to clear off a little bit of detail right in here so that they'll fit flush. I will widen these later, but it's nice to just at least have them placed. The intakes mostly fit very well, as you can see. The only place where I had a little bit of a less than stellar fit was the inside of the starboard intake along this join line. As you can see, kind of up in here. Shut up, compressor. Got a little bit nasty in places, so I'm going to be going through there with probably some epoxy just to clean that up. Otherwise, everything looks pretty solid. Maybe a little bit of cleanup here on these sort of rear quarter pieces that attach to the intake trunk, form this outer wall here of the fuselage. Got the stabilizer mounts back there. They also extend forward into this sort of gear bay wall thing. And in here, just because of the thinness of the pieces, it fits a little bit interesting, or I should say the join is a little bit interesting. So, that may be seeing a bit of epoxy treatment as well. And yeah, that's basically that for the intakes. We've got the shoulder hump things here, all the nice detail that you get to add into these gear bays, including, I love these plastic wiring looms. These things are amazing, and I really wish every kit manufacturer would look into these. I also really like this little touch of the sort of pre-mount for the main gear struts, so that's already in there. You don't have to fuck with anything. It's there. Let's see, what else have we got? So they also provide stencils for the inside of the intakes. Now, I wish I had positioned these a little bit better because, as you can see, the upper ramps kind of get in the way, but we can deal. I would show you sort of up the snout of these intakes, but it's really hard to get a good position on this because the stupid camera and I'm hitting it with the nose right now. There's literally no way to get a really good view down there, but in the proper light, if you look down there, you can see the intake blades and all that good stuff. So that is that. Again, aside from this sort of inside seam here, everything went hunky-dory. I will say this shoulder piece, because it fits both down into parts up here from the upper fuselage, so there's some pins in there that go like that, plus fitting into the exhaust trunk, you basically have to hold it against the exhaust trunk and then push it all down, which is kind of frustrating. I wish there was a better way of their accomplishing that, but we can deal with that. So this is what Great Wall has given us as far as intakes go, and I have to say this is a fantastic job overall. Even accounting for this little installation fuckery here that's going to have to be cleaned up a bit, they did a phenomenal job, and especially in just the way it was all engineered, the detail in the gear bays, just the one-pieceness of it all, the detail inside the intakes, even including stencils, nice to see. I feel like they took the complaints about the MiG-29 kits and their fun with the exhaust and the intakes to heart and really brought it in with this kit and made something truly special. Now, compared to the Kitty Hawk kit, you still have these bits of nastiness here. And just, look at these two gear bays next to each other. I mean, the difference in detail on these is night and day. This one has all the wiring. It's got, the plumbing is much less vague. This one is like, here's a pipe that goes here. This one here is this pipe with, all kinds of raised detail on it. Here are wiring looms, even along the side thing here. It's like this one just has some raised dots, is basically all that you get to denote things. This one has raised dots with different spacing. It's got holes. I mean, it's, look in there. That is gorgeous detail. So I think if we're looking at a detail perspective and a fit perspective with, the front and rear trunks, there's a little bit of nastiness there. These intakes, I'm not a fan of these tabs and the way they install, because getting in there to clean that up is a pain in the ass with all the masking that has to be done to the intakes anyway. And I mean, honestly, these things are just proportionally wacky compared to reference photos. And somebody on Facebook noted that it looks like the intake walls are made out of bricks, which, I don't know about that. I mean, these are definitely thinner in appearance than these, but, that's a small thing compared to, I think, everything else going on here. So these are much more competent than I anticipated they would be, but they still fall short in a number of places. So that is intakes. It is time to get on to, I think, either control surfaces or tails or something like that is coming up next. So I will see you guys in the next installment. Later.